Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we are stepping into a time machine. But, not the kind you might expect.
No, definitely not.
Right. We aren't going to a battlefield, at least. Not one with swords and shields anyway. And we aren't going to a royal court. We are going to a marketplace.
A very loud marketplace.
Exactly. I want you to just close your eyes for a second. Imagine the smells of, spices, unwashed bodies, maybe some roasting meat.
Typical 4th century Constantinople.
Yeah, 4th century Constantinople. The sun is beating down. You're just trying to buy a loaf of bread, maybe check the price of fish for dinner.
Right.
But instead of haggling over coins, the baker is leaning over the counter flour all over his apron, and he is shouting at you about whether the Son of God was, quote, begotten or created.
It really sounds like a scene from a comedy sketch, doesn't it? Like Monty Python or something?
It totally does.
But this was the absolute reality of the time. I mean, you would have money changers asking you if you believed in creation from nothing before they would even touch your currency.
What?
Yeah. If you went to the baths to relax, the attendant might literally ask you if the sun was of the same substance or of a like substance as the Father before handing you a towel.
That's just an incredibly vivid, almost manic atmosphere.
Yeah.
And it's exactly what Gregory of Nazianzus describes in the source material we are covering today.
It is.
Because we are doing a deep dive into his famous theological orations. And he paints this picture of a world where theological debate isn't reserved for the seminaries.
Or the hush libraries.
Right, or the councils of bishops. It is buzzing in the streets. It is ruining dinner parties. He even mentions it's causing confusion in the women's apartments.
Everyone has an opinion.
Everyone has an opinion, and everyone is shouting it at the top of their lungs.
It was a time of immense intellectual ferment, certainly. But for Gregory, it wasn't just ferment, it was noise.
Just static.
And more than that, it was dangerous noise. Because he is writing these orations against a specific group of opponents known as the Eunomians, or sometimes they're called the Enemians. And these were people who, in Gregory's view anyway, treated the great mystery of God like a sport.
He actually has a nickname for them, doesn't he? Something about tumbling.
Yes. He calls them word tumblers.
Word tumblers, I love that.
The Greek is lexipaitai. It really brings to mind circus performers, acrobats. He says they delight in profane chatter and pseudo-knowledge.
So they're just showing off.
Exactly. They pride themselves on being able to tie you up in logical knots. And for Gregory, this was heartbreaking. He felt they were taking the most sacred thing in existence, the ineffable nature of God, and treating it like a wrestling match in a theater.
Just playing to the crowd for applause.
Precisely. They were turning theology into a giant game of gotcha.
I love that image of the wrestling match because it sets the stakes so well for what we're going to talk about. This isn't just dry academic writing we're looking at. This is a counterattack.
It's a highly strategic defense.
So, our mission for this deep dive is to cut through that noise, just like Gregory tried to do. We are going to walk through these orations, specifically numbers 27 through 30, and we're going to try to answer 3 massive questions that Gregory tackles.
Big 3.
First, who is actually qualified to talk about God? Because apparently the guy selling me bread might not be the best source.
Probably not, according to Gregory.
Second, why is God essentially unknowable? Like, why can't we just pin him down with a clean definition?
Right.
And third, how do we solve the logic puzzles regarding the Son of God? Because the opponents had some really tricky arguments.
They did. Those are the 3 pillars of his argument. And honestly, they are just as relevant today. I mean, we live in an age of internet debates, hot takes, and 280-character theology.
Oh, for sure. The comment sections are our version of the Constantinople marketplace.
Exactly. The temptation to reduce the divine to a slogan is just as strong now as it was in the 4th century.
Absolutely. So let's unpack this first question. Who gets to do theology? Because Gregory seems pretty strict right out of the gate. He basically puts up a giant do not enter sign on the door of the church.
He really does. He starts Oration 27 by warning that philosophizing about God is not for everyone.
Yeah.
He explicitly says it is not a cheaply acquired subject.
Cheaply acquired.
Right. You don't just pick it up like a hobby on a Sunday afternoon because the game was rained out.
He says it's not for earthbound minds, which, that sounds a little elitist, doesn't it? Like, I'm the bishop, I have the fancy hat, you listen, I talk. Is that what's happening here?
I can see why it sounds that way, but I don't think it's social elitism as much as spiritual pragmatism.
Okay. How so?
Well, Gregory insists that before you can speak about God, what he calls theology proper, you must have a solid footing in contemplation. The Greek term is theoria. You must be purified in soul and body, or at least be in the active process of being purified.
So it's about preparation.
Yes. And he uses a very striking analogy here to explain why. He says it is unsafe for weak eyes to look at the sun.
Okay, that makes sense. If I walk outside and stare at the sun right now, I go blind. The sun isn't being mean or elitist. It's just powerful.
Precisely. The sun is the sun. It radiates regardless of your capacity to receive it.
Right.
So Gregory is saying that if your internal world is chaotic, if you are full of external defilement, if you are driven by ego or anger or a lust for power, you cannot possibly perceive the truth of God clearly.
Because you act as a dirty lens.
You'll distort the light. And worse, you might actually burn yourself. It is fundamentally unsafe for the impure to touch the pure.
He also has some very specific thoughts on when we should do theology. I found this part kind of funny because it feels so relatable to our modern attention spans.
Oh, his list of bad times to talk about God.
Yes, he says don't do it after the races, don't do it after the theater, and definitely don't do it after a big dinner.
It sounds funny, like he's just being a grumpy old man telling kids to get off his lawn. But his point is profoundly serious. He's asking for a permitted occasion.
A permitted occasion?
He says the mud must settle so the water is clear. Think about it. If you've just come from the chariot races, your blood is pumping, you're excited, you're thinking about winners and losers, you are in a highly competitive mindset.
Right. You're in sports fan mode. You're ready to argue about referee calls.
Exactly. You bring that combative energy into theology,
Right.
and you turn God into a team to root for instead of a mystery to revere. And if you just had a massive feast, you're lethargic. You're in a food coma. You might even be a bit tipsy.
Yeah, that's not the time to ponder the infinite.
No. These are not the states of mind for contemplating the infinite. Theology shouldn't be treated like idle gossip to pass the time while you digest your food. It requires a stillness, a quieting of the passions.
He wants us to be free from external disturbance. It's all about focus. But then he takes this idea of who can approach God and he blows it up into this massive scriptural metaphor. He goes back to the book of Exodus, to the story of Moses on Mount Sinai.
Ah, yes, the metaphor of the mountain. This really structures his whole approach to theological authority. He looks at the story of the giving of the law in Exodus 19. You have the mountain wrapped in smoke and fire, trembling.
It's a terrifying scene.
And you have a very strict hierarchy of who can go where on that mountain.
So at the very top, you have Moses.
Right. Moses goes right up into the cloud. He speaks face to face with God. Gregory says, if you are a Moses, go into the cloud.
Okay.
That represents the highest level of purification and contemplation. If you have done the work, if you are holy, you can enter the mystery.
But not everyone is a Moses. I mean, most of us are definitely not that.
No, we aren't.
Yeah.
So then you have Aaron, the priest. Gregory says, if you are an Aaron, go up, but stand near. You don't get the full immersion in the cloud, but you are close. You can hear the voice clearly.
So there's levels to this.
Yes. Then you have the elders, Nadab and Abihu, and the 70 elders. They stand a bit further back. They support the process, but they keep their distance.
And then you have the multitude, the regular people, just the everyday folks from the camp.
They stay at the bottom of the mountain.
And they just listen to the trumpet and see the smoke, right? They don't try to climb it at all.
Exactly. They respect the distance. They listen to the voice of the prophet who has been up the mountain, but they don't presume to rush up there themselves without preparation.
Which makes sense. But then Gregory adds a category that I think is directed squarely at his opponents, the Eunomians. He mentions the evil and savage beasts.
Yes. That's not a subtle dig at all.
Not even a little bit.
In the Exodus story, there's a strict command that if even an animal touches the mountain, it must be stoned to death. Gregory interprets this allegorically.
Okay, how does he spin that?
He says, if you are a savage beast, meaning a theological opponent, who is just there to tear things apart, to attack, to destroy the mystery, you must withdraw. You have no business on holy ground.
And what happens if they don't withdraw? If they charge the mountain anyway?
He says they will be stoned with true discourse.
Stoned with true discourse. That is a heavy metal theology line right there.
It really is. He's saying that truth itself is a stone. It is solid, heavy, and unyielding.
You can't argue with a rock.
Exactly. If you run headfirst into the truth with a beastly, aggressive intellect, the truth will simply crush you. It's a warning. Do not approach the mystery of God with a predatory mindset.
So we've established the rules of engagement here. You need purity, you need the right timing, let the mud settle, and you need to know your place on the mountain.
That's the foundation.
Right. Now, let's say we follow the rules, we do the work, we climb up, we get past the smoke. Now we move to section 2. We are entering the second oration now. This is where Gregory talks about what happens when you actually try to look at God. And spoiler alert, you can't.
This is the core of the doctrine of the incomprehensibility of God. And Gregory grounds this, again, in a deeply personal experience, which he describes using that same Sinai imagery.
He puts himself in Moses' shoes.
He does. He describes himself running up the mountain, trying to leave all material things behind, withdrawing entirely into himself to try and see God. He wants to see the first nature.
And what does he actually see? Does he get the full picture?
No. He says he sees the back of God.
The back of God. This is from Exodus 33, right? Where Moses asks to see God's glory, and God basically says, you can't see my face and live.
Yes. So God puts Moses in the cleft of the rock.
Right, and covers him with his hand until he passes by, so Moses only sees his back.
Gregory interprets this passage beautifully. He says he was sheltered by the rock, which he explicitly identifies as the word Christ, the incarnation.
Oh, that's an interesting connection.
And when he looked out from that shelter, he didn't see the divine essence. He didn't see what God is in himself. He saw the back parts, which he defines as the majesty and glory manifested in creation.
So seeing the back of God is sort of like seeing the wake that a ship leaves in the water. You don't necessarily see the ship itself, but you see the disturbance it caused. You see the evidence of its passing.
That's a perfect way to put it. We see the shadows and the reflections. We see the after effects of God's power and order in the universe. But Gregory is absolutely adamant here. He writes, to define God in words is an impossibility.
Because words are limits.
Exactly. If you define God, you limit him. You put a conceptual boundary around the boundless. You essentially draw a circle on a piece of paper and say, God is inside this line. But God is infinite. He breaks every circle.
And this leads him into what I think is easily one of the most fun parts of the text. He essentially argues that if we really want to understand the back of God, we should look at the physical world around us.
Natural theology.
Right. And he launches into this massive argument from creation. He starts with a pretty simple analogy. The lute.
It's a classic argument from design. He says, imagine you see a beautifully made lute. You see how the strings are fitted with perfect tension. You see the wood is polished and shaped. You hear the gorgeous melody it produces.
Okay.
Even if you don't actually see the lute maker in the room with you, the object itself forces you to think of him. You know there is a craftsman. You know there is intelligence behind the design.
Right. You don't assume the wood just fell out of a tree into the shape of a lute by accident.
No one would believe that.
No.
And then, to prove the craftsmanship of the world, Gregory kind of turns into a 4th century nature documentary host.
I was reading this list and I was laughing because he gets so incredibly specific. He's just delighting in the weirdness of nature. He basically challenges his opponent, explain these things to me, and then maybe I'll let you explain God's uncreated essence.
He really does. He starts small. He talks about the grasshopper.
The musical grasshopper.
Yeah. He asks his opponents, who put the lute in its breast? How does it make that sound? Where does the music come from in such a tiny creature?
And he talks about the spider, too. He calls the spider a geometrician.
That's such a cool title.
It is a great title for a spider, a geometrician.
Think about it from his perspective. He asks, who taught the spider to weave such intricate webs? It stretches threads from invisible beginnings to create a trap for food. It creates concentric circles.
It understands tension and structure intuitively.
Right. But it doesn't have a ruler. It doesn't have a blueprint. It's pure instinctual engineering. Gregory asks the Eunomians, did you teach the spider Euclid? No. Then sit down.
And the bees. He's obsessed with the hexagonal cells of the honeycomb.
The hexagon is an absolute marvel of efficiency. And Gregory notes this. He asks how the bee knows to build in hexagons.
Because mathematically, it's the perfect shape, right?
Yes, to store the most honey with the least amount of wax without wasting any space between the cells. If they used circles, there would be gaps everywhere. Triangles would be inefficient in terms of material. The bee somehow just knows advanced geometry.
Then he moves to the peacock. He talks about the peacock's vanity. He says when the peacock sees someone looking at it, it struts around and shows off its star-studded tail.
He points out the beauty of the colors, the iridescence of the feathers. Who taught the bird to be vain? Who gave it that specific sense of display and pride?
He also mentions the tactical formation of cranes, how they fly in formation and actually take turns leading the flock.
It's basic aerodynamics. They draft off each other to save energy, and when the leader gets tired, they swap out.
It's amazing that they noticed this stuff back then. And he doesn't just stick to animals. He talks about the ocean.
A very terrifying subject for ancient people.
Yeah, he's fascinated by the fact that the sea is this massive, powerful, chaotic force, yet it's bound by something as weak and shifting as sand. And he asks, why doesn't it overflow? Rivers are constantly pouring into it, the Nile, the Danube, but the ocean stays the exact same size.
In the ancient world, the ocean represented primeval chaos. The fact that it stayed within its boundaries and didn't just swallow the earth was seen as a daily, ongoing miracle of God's order.
And then he turns inward, which I found fascinating. He turns to the human body. He asks about the connection between the soul and the body. How does memory work?
That is a deep philosophical question.
It is. Think about that. I can close my eyes right now and picture my childhood home perfectly. Where is that picture stored? Is it in a tiny drawer somewhere in my brain tissue?
And how does a thought turn into an action? That's the classic mind-body problem.
Right.
I have the abstract, immaterial thought, I want to lift my arm, and suddenly physical muscles contract, neurons fire, and the arm lifts. Gregory asks his opponents, how? What is the bridge between the immaterial thought and the material meat of the arm?
His point in bringing all of this up is what, exactly? To overwhelm them.
It's an argument of fortiori. From the lesser to the greater, he is saying, if you cannot even explain the workshop of nature, if you can't tell me the logic of a spider's web, or the mystery of your own memory, or why the ocean stays put, how incredibly arrogant is it to claim you can comprehend the very essence of the Creator who made it all?
You are a stranger to your own self.
Exactly. You don't even know how you work, yet you claim to know exactly how God works.
It's a very humbling exercise. You look at the spider, you look at the ocean, and you realize, okay, I don't even know how this works. Maybe I shouldn't claim to know exactly how God's internal life functions.
Exactly. And this leads into a very specific philosophical point. Having established the mystery, he wants to completely dismantle the idea that God has a body. Because if God is incomprehensible and infinite, he simply cannot be material.
Right. He argues that if God has a body, he's immediately subject to limitations.
Limitation, dissolution, and strife. Think about a physical body, any body at all. It is made of parts: blood, bone, tissue, atoms.
Okay.
Anything made of parts had to be assembled at some point. And logically, anything that is assembled can be taken apart.
So it can be destroyed.
That means it can die. It can dissolve back into its component pieces. Gregory says God is the first nature. He is entirely simple and uncompounded. He has no parts. Therefore, he cannot be a body.
He even takes a swing at the fifth element idea here. I guess some philosophers argued God was made of a special celestial stuff, like the ether.
Yes, the quintessence.
Yeah.
The stuff the stars and planets were thought to be made of. The philosophical argument was that this fifth element moves naturally in a circle, so it's perfect and divine.
But Gregory doesn't buy it.
Not at all. He says even if it's a special circular moving fifth element, it's still matter. It's still a substance subject to motion. If it moves, something else has to move it. If it's contained in space, it is limited by that space.
So Gregory concludes that God is incorporeal, completely without a body.
Yes, but he's very careful to note a caveat here. Saying God is incorporeal only tells us what he is not.
Oh, interesting.
He doesn't tell us what he is.
It's negative theology. We're just peeling away the wrong ideas. He's not a body, he's not limited, he's not created, but we still haven't hit the core positive definition because there isn't one we can actually grasp.
Precisely. We are carving the statue by removing the excess stone, but we never fully reveal the face.
Okay, so we firmly established that God is a mystery with a capital M. Now we enter the ring for the main event. Section 3. The battle for the sun. This is covered in the third oration. And this is where the word tumblers really come out to play their games.
The Eunomians had a very specific, very clear agenda. They wanted to prove that the Son of God was not fully God in the same way the Father is God.
They wanted a hierarchy.
Yes. They argued he was a creature, a high-ranking creature perhaps, maybe the first and greatest creation through which everything else was made, but created nonetheless, and therefore not equal to the Father in essence.
And they used what they thought were absolutely unbreakable logic traps to prove it. I want to walk through these traps, because watching Gregory parry them is like watching a fencing master at work. Let's look at trap number 1, the when question.
A classic.
The opponents argue if the Son was begotten, there must have been a time when he did not exist.
This was the famous Arian slogan, there was when he was not. And frankly, it sounds highly logical to us humans.
Because it matches our experience.
Exactly. If I beget a son, I have to exist before him. I am older, he is younger. There was a time in history when he wasn't there. The cause always precedes the effect in time.
So how does Gregory get out of that? If the Father is the cause of the Son, doesn't he mathematically have to be older?
Gregory argues that begetting in God is entirely unique. It is completely above time. He says the Father was never without the Son, just as the Son is never without its light.
Ah, use the sun analogy again. Walk us through that.
Imagine the sun in the sky. Can you have the sun existing as the sun without it emitting light?
No, if the ball of gas is there, the light is streaming off it. It happens simultaneously.
Exactly. You don't have the sun sitting there for a million years in the dark, just a cold ball of gas, and then suddenly it decides to turn on the light. The light is intrinsic to the sun's very nature.
So the light is co-eternal with the star.
Right. Gregory says to them, when did the Father come into being? The answer, of course, is never. He always was. Then Gregory says, then the same thing is true of the Son.
Because the sun is the light.
The begetting isn't an event on a historical timeline. It's an eternal reality of God's nature. The Son is the radiance of the Father's glory. If the glory is eternal, the radiance must be eternal.
I really like that. So the Son isn't a younger God who showed up later. He is co-eternal.
Correct. Time does not apply here.
Okay, trap number 2. This one is incredibly tricky. It feels exactly like a lawyer trying to trick a witness on the stand. The question they pose is this: did the Father beget the Son willingly or unwillingly?
This is a textbook false dilemma.
Yeah.
They are trying to force Gregory into a very tight corner.
Okay, let's play it out. If he says unwillingly, what happens?
If he says unwillingly, it implies the Father was forced, that he was under some external compulsion or higher power to have a son, or that it was just a natural accident he couldn't control.
Which is absurd.
Completely absurd, because God is sovereign and is not forced by anything.
So he obviously has to say willingly.
But if he says willingly, the Eunomians spring their trap. Aha. Then the Son is a child of the will. He came into existence because God decided to make him, just like God decided to make the world.
Oh, I see.
Therefore, he is a creation, not God by nature. He is merely a result of a choice that could have gone the other way.
It totally feels like a gotcha moment. You're either forced or you're making a choice to create. How on earth does Gregory handle it?
He does something brilliant. He turns it right back on them. He asks them a question about their own existence. He asks his opponents, did you exist willingly or unwillingly?
Wait, he just flips the script and asks the opponent about their own birth.
Yes. He asks, do you exist as God's creature willingly or unwillingly? Think about it. Did you choose to be born?
No, I definitely didn't fill out a form before I got here.
Right. So if you say willingly, it's a lie. You didn't choose it. But if you say unwillingly, it implies you are being forced to exist against your will, that you are a prisoner of life being tortured by existence.
Which is also a trap.
Gregory uses this to show that the question itself is fundamentally broken. But his deeper point is about God. He argues that God's existence transcends this gap between will and fact.
What does that mean in practice?
He says that for God, the will to beget is the exact same thing as the act of generation. It's not a choice between options A, B, or C. The Father is Father. He doesn't decide to be Father on a whim.
That's deep. So it's not like God woke up one eternity and said, you know what, I think I'll have a son today. It's built into the very fabric of who he is.
Correct. The Father generates the Son by nature, not by a decision of the will that happens at a certain point in time. It is his nature to be the Father.
Okay, trap number 3. Did he generate the Son from existing material or from non-existing material?
Again, they are trying to force biological or manufacturing logic onto the divine.
Like he's building a house.
Right. If I make a table, I use wood. It's existing material. If God creates the universe, he uses nothing. Creation ex nihilo, non-existing material. They want to force the Son into one of those two created categories. Is he made of stuff or made of nothing?
And Gregory says,
He says this entire framework applies only to created things. The Son is not a creation. He's of the same essence. He isn't made out of stuff, nor is he made out of nothing.
and where does he come from?
He is from the Father. He shares the uncreated substance of the Father.
This leads to a really crucial theological definition Gregory gives. He has to explain what father actually means in this context if it doesn't mean older guy who made the younger guy. Because in human terms, fathers always precede sons.
This is one of Gregory's most important contributions to theology. He says, the word father is not the name of an essence or substance. It's not a biological tag. And it's not the name of an action. It is the name of a relation.
A relation. Unpack that for us.
It means that the concept of father only exists in relation to the concept of son. You literally cannot be a father without a child.
Because the child makes you a father.
The terms mutually define each other. It perfectly explains how they can be distinct persons. Father and son are different relations, but they share the exact same nature.
So the difference isn't what they are, which is God, but how they relate to each other.
Exactly. The Father is the unbegotten, the Son is the begotten, the Spirit is the proceeding. These are eternal relationships within the one single essence.
And this brings Gregory to his beautiful summary of the Trinity. He says, the one, moving toward the twofold, found its rest in the threefold.
It's an incredibly poetic way of describing the internal, eternal life of God. Monotheism isn't just a static, lonely, mathematical one.
It's not just a monolith floating in space.
No, it's a dynamic unity. The one flows into the Son and rests in the Spirit. It's a community of love that is so absolutely perfect, it is one God.
That is just beautiful. Found its rest in the threefold. Okay, so we've survived the logic traps, but the opponents have one more weapon in their arsenal, and frankly, it's a big one. They have the Bible itself.
Yes. This is section 4, dealing with the fourth oration. The Eunomians didn't just use abstract logic puzzles. They quoted Scripture extensively. They had a massive stack of problems, verses where Jesus clearly sounds inferior to God.
Right, verses like, the Lord created me, or Jesus saying the Father is greater than I. That seems pretty open and shut, doesn't it? I mean, if Jesus himself says the Father is greater, how can they be completely equal?
It seems like a contradiction.
If I say my boss is greater than me, I am openly admitting I am not the boss. I am lower on the org chart.
It is a very strong argument on the surface. Gregory needs a robust way to interpret these texts without just throwing them out or ignoring them. So he introduces his hermeneutical key. A hermeneutic is just a method or principle of interpretation. And Gregory gives us a rule. He calls it the rule of two natures.
Okay, how does that rule work?
Gregory says, we know from the core faith that Christ is both fully God and fully man. Two natures in one person. So when you read a verse about Jesus in the Bible, you have to stop and ask, is this speaking about his divinity, or is it speaking about his humanity?
So you essentially divide the verses into two buckets.
Exactly. You attribute the lofty divine expressions to the divinity of the God bucket, and you attribute the lowly, humble expressions, the ones involving suffering or limitation, to the humanity, the man bucket. He actually calls the humanity the composite or the form of a slave.
He gives some really great punchy examples of this back and forth. He says, he was baptized as a human, but he took away sins as God.
Yes. He wept, that goes in the human bucket.
Yeah.
But he causes tears to cease, that goes in the God bucket. He was physically weak human, but he is the power of God.
He hungered.
Right. He hungered human, but he fed the 5,000 with a few loaves, God. Gregory says if you don't actively separate these aspects when you read, you end up completely confused.
You end up with a demigod.
You can't use the human verses to try and disprove the divine nature. You have to recognize and hold the paradox of the incarnation.
Let's look at the specific gotcha versus Gregory tackles. Because the opponents weren't just using general ideas, they had specific bookmark texts they kept bringing up. The first one is from Proverbs chapter 8, verse 22. It says, the Lord created me as the beginning of his ways.
This was the absolute Arian trump card. They identified the speaker in Proverbs as wisdom, and they said rightly that wisdom is a title for the Son, and the text plainly says created. Boom. Case closed. He's a creature.
How does Gregory handle the word created there?
He argues that you have to look at the immediate context of the verse. Yes, the text uses the word created, but in the exact same passage, just a few lines away, it uses the word begotten.
So it uses both.
Yes. Gregory says created refers to his humanity, his role in the physical works of creation and redemption, his ways. But begotten refers to his eternal divinity. You have to read the whole context.
You can't just cherry pick one verb.
Exactly. He also argues that wisdom is personified in many different ways throughout Scripture.
Yeah.
You cannot build an entire massive theology on one poetic word in Proverbs while completely ignoring the clear statements in the Gospel of John.
Okay, what about the ignorance verse? Because this one always stumps people today too. Mark 13, verse 32. Jesus is talking about the end of the world, and he says, no one knows the day or hour, not even the angels in heaven, nor the Son, but only the Father.
It is a genuinely shocking verse.
It is.
If he is God, God knows everything.
Yeah.
God is totally omniscient. How can the Son possibly be ignorant of the end of the world? Is he pretending?
Right. It feels weird. Like he's saying, I know, but I'm not telling you guys. It feels deceptive.
Gregory offers a couple of ways to look at this, which shows he really wrestled with it. First, he applies the standard rule of two natures. As God, he knows. As a human, he does not know.
Meaning his physical brain.
Right. The human brain of Jesus was finite. It didn't hold the infinite data of the entire universe in a conscious way at every single second. So, speaking genuinely as a man, he could authentically say, I don't know.
That makes a lot of sense. It preserved his real, actual humanity. He wasn't just a robot walking around with an omniscient God brain overriding everything.
Exactly. He was truly human. But Gregory also offers a deeper, more subtle theological explanation. He says maybe the Son claims ignorance here to show that he is not separate from the first cause.
Okay, what does that mean?
He suggests that the Son obviously knows, but he doesn't know independently of the Father. His knowledge is derived from the Father, just as his very being is derived from the Father.
Because they share everything.
Yes. By saying only the Father knows, he's honoring the ultimate source of his own divinity. He's essentially saying, I don't have a secret stash of knowledge over here that is separate from the Father. What he knows, I know because I am from him.
So it's a statement of unity and deference.
Not a literal lack of data. He is pointing back to the source.
So it's like saying the knowledge resides in the head, not just the hand, even though the hand and the head are part of the exact same body and share the same nervous system.
Something like that, yes.
Yeah.
It's a relational truth.
Speaking of bodies, let's talk about the subjection verse. 1 Corinthians 15 says, Then the Son himself will be subjected to the one who put all things in subjection under him.
Another tough one.
That sounds explicitly like he's a subordinate. Subjected usually means bossed around, or at least taking orders from a superior.
Gregory says this isn't about the Son being demoted at the end of time. It's about the Son functioning as the head of the body, which is us, the church, the humanity.
Us.
When Paul says the Son will be subjected, it means he is presenting us, his collective body, to the Father.
So he is acting as the representative.
Exactly. He makes our disobedience his own on the cross. He suffers for it. He conquers it. And then at the very end of time, he presents our subjection, meaning our saved state, our restored harmony with God to the Father. He says, here they are. They're with me. They are subject to you through me. It's the Son bringing humanity home. The subjection is the grand victory of salvation, not the personal servitude of the Son to the Father.
That's a lovely image. It's not him being pushed down in rank. It's him lifting us up into the divine life.
Yes, it's a deeply salvific reading.
And finally, the impossibility verse. This one is my absolute favorite logic flip in the whole text. John 5, verse 19. The Son can do nothing on his own. The opponents saw that and said, see, he's weak. He needs permission. He can't act alone like a true God could.
And Gregory flips this completely on its head. He asks his audience, what does it actually mean if you cannot do something different?
Well, usually it means you're restricted. Like, I can't fly because I'm human. That's a weakness.
But think about it in terms of nature and perfection. Imagine two things that are perfectly, absolutely identical in will and power. It is strictly impossible for one to do something different than the other.
Because they are the same.
That's like saying a square cannot be round. Is the square wink because it can't be round?
No. That's just the very definition of what a square is. It's perfectly a square.
Exactly. Gregory says the phrase, the Son can do nothing on his own, means it is logically impossible for the Son to diverge from the Father. It doesn't mean he is weak and needs permission. It means he shares the exact same will.
Your will is one.
Their will is so perfectly one that they literally cannot act separately. It proves his equality. It proves he is not a separate secondary God with a separate competing agenda. This is what theologians call the impossibility of divergence.
That is a total mental flip. I can't do anything else because I am perfectly one with the Father. It turns the apparent weakness into the ultimate proof of strength and unity.
It's brilliant rhetoric. He takes their strongest weapon, their favorite verse, and turns it into an ironclad proof for the Trinity.
To wrap up this section on the Son, Gregory runs through a list of titles. It's like a rapid-fire resume of Jesus to illustrate this dual nature we've been discussing for the last half hour.
It's a very powerful poetic list. He starts by listing the divine titles. He is the Word because he perfectly expresses the Father.
Right. He is the image, a living, exact reproduction. He is the way leading us. He is the shepherd ruling and protecting the flock.
Those are all very majestic, but then he slams them right up against the human titles.
Yes. The contrast is the point. He's the lamb being slaughtered. He is the door. And then Gregory uses one that is genuinely startling. He calls him the worm.
The worm. That is vivid and honestly kind of gross. Where does it even come from?
It's from Song 22, a messianic psalm. It says, I am a worm and no man.
Why would the God of the universe call himself a worm?
Because a worm is completely of the earth. It crawls in the dirt, it is utterly vulnerable, it is trodden underfoot by everyone. It has absolutely no defense mechanism.
So it's the ultimate lowliness.
Yes, Gregory uses it to show the incredible, staggering range of the incarnation. He went from being the word that spoke the galaxies into existence to a worm crushed in the mud, all just to bridge the infinite gap between God and man.
That really drives it home. The word and the worm. That's the entire paradox right there in 2 titles.
It summarizes the whole argument beautifully. So, we've been on quite a journey today. We started in the noisy, smelly marketplace with the bread buyers arguing logic.
The word tumblers.
We learned the rules of engagement, purify yourself, and let the mud settle before you speak. We climbed the mountain with Moses and learned that God is completely incomprehensible. We can only see the back parts through the wonders of nature.
The spider in the ocean.
We navigated the logic traps about time and will, proving the Son is co-eternal. And we decoded the problem verses by seeing the crucial difference between the divine and the human natures of Christ.
We have established a very solid fortress of theology today. We've defended the Father and the Son. We have absolutely reclaimed the high ground from the Eunomians. But there's always a but in theology, isn't there?
There is. Just as Gregory thinks he's finished, just as the argument seems completely won and the crowd should go home, the opponents throw one last stone.
And this brings us to the outro. What is the stone?
It's the question that launches the entire next phase of the battle.
They ask, okay, maybe we buy the argument for the Son. But what about the Holy Spirit? From where do you import this strange God?
This strange God. That is quite a phrase to throw at the bishop.
The source material we have for today ends right on this massive cliffhanger. It's the very beginning of the 5th oration. The opponents are basically saying, look, the Bible talks constantly about the Father, it talks constantly about the Son, but the Spirit. The Bible is notoriously quiet about the Spirit's full divinity. Where are you getting this from?
And that is exactly where our text leaves us today, standing on the edge of the next great debate. It really shows that theology is a constant building process. You settle one foundation, you fight a battle for years to establish it, and immediately you have to start building the next wall while defending it.
It does, and it brings us right back to that first lesson from Gregory. We're trying to name the unnameable. As Gregory said in his closing thoughts, we can never breathe the whole air.
We can never breathe the whole air. I like that a lot.
We are, at best, sketching a shadow of the truth. And I think the challenge for us, and really for everyone listening, is to take that profound humility to heart.
What does that look like in practice, though, for the person listening to this on their morning commute?
In an age of complete information overload, where we are constantly bombarded with noise, just like Gregory's marketplace, are we willing to pause?
To not immediately post a hot take.
Yes. Are we willing to purify ourselves, to let the mud settle completely, and sit in the cloud of unknowing on the mountain before we presume to speak about the divine?
That is a very provocative thought. Maybe the absolute best theology starts with silence, not shouting.
I believe Gregory would completely agree with that.
Well, on that note, we're going to leave you in the cloud. We'll have to save the strange God, the Holy Spirit, for another dive. Thanks for climbing the mountain with us today on The Deep Dive. We'll see you next time.
Goodbye.